What do we, man, I got some stuff written up. I don't know if Kathy has done anything. She's been slacking pretty hard lately. So,
I don't believe
Wow.
that for a second.
Someone's cruising for a bruising.
I feel so much safer now that we aren't like right beside each other. In the old school days of the Pear Genius podcast, we used to sit beside each other and I had to really be careful. But now I can just be free to be me. It makes the show way spicier.
You're going to be free to be you for a long time to come.
I hear that.
That's all women have is just empty threats, but it's okay. Us men, we're good at surviving. Alone in the desert with our
I'm
thoughts.
I'm sensing some deeper issues here. Do either of you guys want to share?
We have so much to share. I think people are sick of us being perfect, so we're just going to embrace the imperfection of how this podcast is tearing us apart.
Yes. Well, I'm here for that because in multiple roles, I often do feel like a counselor.
Oh,
I believe that.
Yeah.
I feel like we're counselors too. There's been a few episodes where it's, oh wow, we're getting in the shit now. Here we go.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the gold is.
Okay. Well, I saw you sent a message and said, we're going to find the gold in the branch.
Hmm.
Yeah. I'm
That's
curious too.
that's the why. That's the why we do this. We got to find your gold, and we're gonna rob your bank. We're gonna keep it all for ourselves. Welcome to the Pear Genius Podcast, and we're going to talk about No Place Like Home because in my original script here, we were going to talk about your podcast, but as it is finished, but it's evergreen content, it's still out there for everyone to enjoy and learn from. And I know that we've listened to a few of your episodes, and man, you are an awesome podcaster. I,
Aw.
I aspire to be as good as you.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. I had some awesome guests. Terry O'Reilly giving his expertise on marketing. Lisa Longball, who is a champion, long drive champion. And my goodness, she just has such a contagious attitude. And yeah, so I've had some great guests on there. They're worth listening to. I sometimes when I'm driving around, I'll listen to my podcasts again.
I when I first started podcasting, I loved listening. I thought I'd be cringier, but I loved listening to it. I was like, oh, okay, this is not so horrific.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not other people want to listen to me,
Yeah.
that
Li
is remains to be seen.
Most people don't like listening to their own voices, which I did find, but 30 years ago, I did some radio and I did not like my voice back then. But over the years, you get used to it. So,
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just
Because
like anything else. You throw yourself out there, you do it, and you get used to it. Because there are people who are like, "How do you get in front of the camera every day and put yourself out there?" I'm like, "Okay." First time it was scary. The second time it was a little less, and now it's whatever.
yes, totally. Exactly. I remember doing my first webinar and I learned the platform and I was sitting there like 10 minutes beforehand and I was writing in my journal, okay, here's my first webinar. I'm so nervous. My stomach is just in knots. I hope it goes well. Just those beginning fears.
I think that it helps to do a podcast and have the headphones on, and you hear your own voice a little bit better, and you get
Mm,
more used to it. When you're a kid and you record yourself and you play it back, you think it's a different person.
yeah.
And I feel like podcasting, you get very used to the sound of your own voice. And it's actually nice to accept yourself as, oh, okay, I don't sound like a weirdo, or I don't sound so, or I don't feel so disconnected from the way I sound.
Well, you have a great podcasting voice, and it's very warm and soothing to listen to. So even when you say controversial things, it still sounds nice when you're saying it. But I have heard some podcasts, and I wish those people would listen to their own voices because not all voices um, track well.
Oh,
That's
for sure.
true. Yeah, it's just like reading an audiobook, and the person who's reading it has a terrible voice. I just stop right there. I'm like, and we're done with this book.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, me and Katya were reading a book on the way down to Phoenix one time, and we just couldn't listen to it.
Yeah.
Either it was the guy's accent, or I was just like, I'm just not in the mood for this. I'm just not in the mood for this. But I would love to do that, though. I would love to do voice acting. But it's funny to be able to control your voice because I know when I get excited, things can ramp up and I sound different. And I'm like, oh God, I need to calm down and be cool. I need to be cool, Alex. I can't be spazzy excited, Alex, on the microphone.
Sure. There's definitely some professional control if you're conscious of it, but also when people are listening to you, because if I speak at an event, I want to be professional, but the humanness still has to come through. And so sometimes when I'm editing my podcasts now, like I just had a lady on yesterday, and she took a lot of time with her thoughts. And I was tempted to shorten it up, but it really was the way she talked and it revealed her personality. And there's an element to being human so that people can feel your energy and catch those innuendos versus being too professional, where sometimes it just sounds like you're reading a script.
Yeah. And I think that it's so awesome that you're saying that because I've been really loving producing and editing the podcast, but I've noticed that I think I'm trimming it up too tight and I'm missing the nuances. I'm missing the laughter. I'm missing just that moment where we can let it hang and just, even for the people at home, just sit there and just listen or think about that for a second. And I think I'm going to do a better job of putting that back in and not making everything so efficient and robotic.
Yeah.
And that's just like a rookie producer type of a realization.
Well, make sure you do this editing on our podcast well.
Oh, I will.
Right? Exactly. It's funny that you say that because I was listening to the podcast that dropped yesterday and I was saying the word menopause and you cut off the last part of it. So it was just like
Oh,
It wasn't.
Like, what the hell?
I would never do that to you. I would
No.
never do that to you. It was the AI editing, but I do have to get better at parenting the AI editing because I can't let the child run wild and just slice it all up and dad's in the kitchen doing something different. And no, I have to be a little bit more hands-on and more caring with the final product, not just so much saving time and using these automated tools. So that's definitely some learning and growing pains here and there. But if you could have seen us when we first started, Sue, which I mean, you always can, you can go back in the record books.
I think I have.
Yeah, it's just basically us sitting there beside each other and it looking like a garage. So Kati is telling me to get things going. And here I thought things were going. My beautiful wife wants to start off.
Well, I would like to know who Sue Styles is. I do, but our listeners might not. So let's get into who you are, what you do, and all the good stuff about you.
Oh, she's amazing.
I think Katy should introduce me because you did such a good job with interpreting my brand from outside. I'll always remember our first meeting when we met at the farmer's market. And I was nervous because my whole life is riding on my career. And I don't know how to make the branding better or to fix a logo. And when I met you guys, my feeling was, oh, she totally got me. And she saw me for who I really am, and she has an idea of what to do with me. And I think it's hard to see ourselves sometimes, like it's hard to see the label when you're inside the jar. And so that is a gift that you have. And I love what you saw in me and how you did my branding and all of my graphics and logo and all of that.
You know what? It's funny because we're both Scorpios. And so you have the exact same ability that I do to really deeply see people. However, you're using it in a totally different way. And you're right, doing it for yourself is just impossible.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
I was going to ask Sue about real estate and what drew you to real estate. Because you just seem like somebody like me, where you could probably be incredible at so many different things. So why focus on that?
This is true, Alex. And I have been incredible at many things over my years. So thank you for shouting that out. When I got out of school, I thought I was going to become a rich and famous actress. That was my mantra. And I was in many plays and I like performing. I'm extroverted. And so there we go. But I fell in love while I was going to acting academy. And I had this little moment, what's most important? Because this was my lifelong dream. But now I fell in love. And so I have heard people talk about the ends of their lives, and you've read these things too, that people never want to work another day, but it's all about the family and if they had love and what those connections were like. And so at that point, I took what I felt was the most important thing, a relationship and an ability to have children and build a family. And so I did the mom thing for all of those years and acted in front of my own children and husband, and weren't they so lucky? And then I became a prenatal teacher. And as the children got a little bit older, I started stepping out and doing things. I guess what I thought was my dream took a bit of a backseat, but and I think this does it with all people, your gift or your talent or your passion, it pops through no matter where you're at. So in our family gatherings, Christmas and special occasions, we usually had a little performance section of the event. Someone play music, sing a song, do a dance, tell a joke. So it's popped up throughout. And now I suppose the performing pops out a bit in real estate, but I try not to be too much the center of attention because now I'm really the guide helping somebody else.
That's awesome. I just see you being very entertaining and charismatic. And the last thing I want to do is be bored when I'm going from house to house and seeing things. And no, I'm serious. Like, I
Yeah.
really think that a good real estate agent is just like a really fun tour guide, and
Hmm.
they make the experience good. The thing that I
Hmm.
do hate about real estate agents is if they're disingenuous, if they're just trying to close a sale and they know that the house isn't right for the person, but they're pushing it, or
Yeah.
that would be the only thing that would drive me absolutely crazy. But I don't see you doing that. I really see your brand being that you doing a great job of finding that perfect fit for people.
Well, one of the first things that I do because I love music is I have a playlist so before our first viewings, I send the playlist and say, if you want to, go ahead and listen to music while we're going to see our homes. And they're all like carefully curated that I think people have fun with. And what I happen to know is that sound triggers memory. You can remember things from the past, but it also can set the stage to build memories for the future. And so, what I'm hoping is if they listen to this playlist or even create their own for this particular experience, that in years to come, they might hear a song that reminds them of the excitement and the joy and the possibility that they had when they were first out shopping for a home. And that would be a positive memory that's in the core.
You know what's amazing about that is that sound and that memory trigger is overriding a typical sense of fear, frustration. Like when you go looking for houses, it can be panicky and frustrating and overwhelming because you're looking at so many and do I get my bid in on time? So that kind of brings me to when Alex and I were buying a house, our first house 20 whatever years ago, it was a totally different market. So it wasn't as overwhelming. It was accessible. It was an accessible market. It was like, who were we on one income to buy a house? However, it was possible. But now, so many of us have this illusion that our hands are tied. How are we ever going to buy a house? How are we going to afford this with the way the market's been going in the economy? So, have you noticed any kind of shift away from that, or are things moving in a little different direction?
Oh my goodness. From 20 years ago when I started, it was a hot market. I think 2004, we had a big boom. You would put a house on the market. Now, I didn't have my license back then, but I was working in a realtor's office. You would put a house on, and it was like, you don't have time for anything. There were so many buyers desperate for a house. They didn't even put conditions in the offers. Really a terrible time to buy, great time to sell, which is why I always think you need more than one property. So if there's a boom, you could sell one and take advantage and you still have a home to live in.
Mm.
Yeah, but over the years, of course, we had boom, then it slowed down for a little while, and then we boomed again. And then it, in Calgary at least, was slow for many years before the pandemic. And then suddenly the buyers have control. You have time. You can go back 2 or 3 times. You can negotiate. you have to make sure when you're selling that the price is really on point, because people are going to be checking that value over and over again. So I think over the time, the shift has been more in whatever market that we're in, and we have to respond to it. You're not in control of how the market goes. You just have to respond to it. What has changed from 20 years ago is that most buyers and sellers are a lot more savvy because they're on technology more. They can do a lot more research. There's a lot of AI out there, which gives information. It's not always right, but people think it's right. So people are coming to the table a lot more. Like my buyers are showing me things that weren't set up on their search for them. Like they're out there looking for stuff themselves.
What do you think about tips for buying a second property? Like you were like going back earlier, you were saying having more than one property. What would like the average person need to know in order to start building a portfolio, let's say of maybe not mansions, but just having a second house for make it an asset, right?
Yeah. I'm a fan because I know the real estate industry. At least find someone who knows the industry to talk about it with you. But like, here's prime example. If you bought a house in 2015, 2016, a few years before the pandemic, and then it went through and you had all of this escalation of value and the city tax assessments have gone up like all over the world, really. Now you have equity in your home. But if you're not using it, it's just sitting there, just increasing in value as your home does. So, in my opinion, and of course, everyone has to weigh it for themselves, but you could take that equity, get a mortgage broker, talk to your bank, and see how much could you take out to put down on another house. And generally, when it's a second property, you try and put down the least amount, and then you're going to rent out that property, which in Calgary is still a relatively safe thing to do compared to other provinces like BC that are having a lot of problems with tenant-owned properties. So as long as those things are agreeable, and also here in Calgary, we need more rental units. They're building a ton of houses at a huge, very fast rate, but we still need places for people to live. You buy something, make sure it's tenant worthy, and then you just ride it out. And the key to making money on real estate is you have to own it until the boom is over. So you ride it out. The boom might not be, when we first bought our first house we moved from Vancouver to Salmon Arm when we started having kids. And we bought a house there. And when we got divorced, we sold the house 10 years later. And we sold it for almost the same thing we bought it for because there had been no boom. 3 or 4 years later, we would have almost doubled. My mother-in-law, for example, she bought a condo right when it was built, almost $100,000. They paid for it 30 years ago. And it went up and down and up and down. And generally, we were looking at selling it a couple of years ago, and it would have been worth around $300,000. Now, so certainly averaged out over time. But in the last year, just because people were looking for it's over 55 and in a good location, and it went up another $100,000 just in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
So
that's a good investment.
But the problem is you don't know it on this side looking forward. You have to wait until the boom happens. And then if it's an investment and you want to get the cash out, fine. The problem is what most people do is like my Auntie Gail, who in Vancouver kept buying properties. She would hear the rumors. Oh, the market's getting hot. It's taking off. Look at the prices keep going up. So she'd get in and she'd buy when the markets are going up. And then she'd want to sell it like when it topped out. So the next year or a year later, she's trying to sell it. Well, that's when the markets are coming down. And 3 times she bought properties trying to ride this wave and lost money every time because she never kept the properties long enough. If she would have kept them till now, they would have been fantastic. But she was trying too fast.
What do you think about waiting for the boom and instead of selling your asset, borrowing on that asset to get another asset?
Sure. Of course you could. So you have to have the stomach for it because on the other side of that coin is properties are going to decrease in value. And you need to know your numbers. And that's very important. Know them from a good mortgage broker can usually get you the best deal. Know what your numbers are. And if the properties go down, if you can't rent it out for a while, can you still carry that mortgage? Can you do some smart things with your money while times are good, like putting away a few $100s a month into the savings account for when the property's empty, when the value decreases, when you have to hold on to things. So that's the risk, is if you can't afford it when it's not at the best.
But going back to, is it 20% you need on your second property or 30%?
Yeah, 20.
So that would be the least
in
amount.
it.
That would be the least amount that you want to do. So I want to avoid taxes as much as possible. So wouldn't it be ideal to just keep building up your portfolio instead of trying to cash out on these things that you're going to get majorly taxed on, and just keep borrowing against these assets that eventually pay themselves back?
Well, a lot of people do just that. So I have someone selling a condo right now, and their father-in-law over the last 50 years has been doing exactly that. He owns, I don't know, like tons. I forget what he said, maybe 20 houses in a certain area. He just kept building them up and buying something else and buying something else. So you certainly can do that. And I am not a tax expert, so I'm not going to advise you publicly on this direction, but people do that.
I'm assuming so. My biggest concern was knowing how much I need to, let's say, borrow against my current home in order to get the second property and then start this investment portfolio.
Yeah. And so you should get those numbers because they're very detailed. The lenders have certain rules, and this is how they do it. And it's a certain percentage, but it's a good amount that you can usually borrow out of the equity in your home. So it's definitely a nice amount. And what a lot of people do if they haven't bought another house with it is they're taking out a line of credit to use for maybe other investments, maybe for renovating, doing a basement suite in their basement. So there's ways to use the money that bring a return on it, and hopefully more and more in the long term.
See, I never told Kathy this, but I do have this secret plan, and I want to help my kids do something like this. Save up while they're living with us, save up, purchase a home that they don't even live in, and start renting it out and have this asset while they're still living with us, and let somebody else just pay it. And guess who gets to be the cool property manager? Old man. They're going to hire this guy, and I'll be taking care of their empires when they get old. I told them by 35, they'll probably be much richer than I am by the time
That's a great idea. Yeah, I know several people who have had good returns on buying homes for their children who are going to university. And I know a lady, she bought a place in Nanaimo. The child was going to university there. They couldn't find a place to rent. And they end up buying this property with a lot of rooms. And so they had, I don't know, 4 or 5 students in there, all renting and covering the costs. Her daughter now has finished university, and they still have this fabulous property because there's not enough rentals there.
Oh, that's smart.
See, my wife thinks I'm brilliant on the air because sometimes I share these ideas that I have. But I'm not buying the house. They're going to work. They're going to save up this money, and then we're going to hire Sue to help us find these places, and then we will build our empire together. So thank you, Sue, now that you're in on the plan.
My pleasure. I think it's a key gift that I have been given is finding unicorns for people. Because one of my first experiences, an acquaintance, I didn't know her before, but we met, I'm in a choir, so we sing together, and she was looking for a very particular house, and she kept saying, I'm not going to find it. It's a unicorn. Her sister was going to move in with them. They were moving, the family was up north, and they had to move down here. There were just a lot of moving parts, and a couple of really cool things happened with that. I'm the facilitator. I feel like I'm the guide. We bring the houses in. Are you interested in looking? So let's go and look. And I will say always what people see on realtor.ca, when you see the pictures and you think you know what the house is, It's never like that when you get your feet on the ground. So anyways, I got her in a bunch of houses. We did write on a property that she lost. We lost in multiple offers, as that does happen. And she was really disappointed because we just thought, oh, we're not going to find another property like this. And the next property that we saw was so much better. Again, you don't know this when you're losing out on a property, but they found a fabulous house, and the sellers had done some really great customization, including a rubber hail resistant roof, which you don't see that every day. So we found a fabulous home that just had the space laid out in particular for these families that were coming together. And then a funny thing happened when we did the home inspection. Then the expert inspectors go through and they tell you from their experience if there's any major problems. And here's where sometimes some other negotiation happens. But in this house, there was some aluminum wiring, which we have all over the place. Sometimes it's a problem, sometimes it isn't. One particular outlet was piggy-tailed, and so the inspector called that out. And so this can be an issue when you're getting insurance. And I thought, I've heard about these things, but I'm not an expert in it. So I phoned my own insurance company and I said, tell me about this. Is piggy-tailed aluminum wiring going to be a problem for getting house insurance? And the girl who picked up the phone tells me, oh my gosh, yes, this is a huge problem. We're not going to give you insurance on it and all this stuff. So I got off the phone and I thought, wow, good thing I did my research, because now we need to negotiate some help into this. Within about 10 minutes, my doorbell rings, and we were having work done on our basement. And so I go to the front door and he says, I'm the electrical inspector. I'm here to inspect your basement. And at first I was a little bit irritated. I wasn't expecting him. I thought, well, you should go around the side. I said, well, go around the side. I'll come let you in. And as I walked to the side door, thank goodness, the universe said, Sue, hello, wake up. You got an electrical inspector in your house right now. And so I was able to ask him, can you tell me, what do you think about this? And his answer was completely the opposite of probably the receptionist who answered the phone at the insurance agent. So I felt like someone was watching over us. And maybe there's a special knack to finding right properties, and then also just making sure, being open, which I am very open now. Is there anything I need to learn? Do I know any experts that I can talk to so that we can get the right information so people can get the house that they want and love living in it?
I think that's
Wow,
one of
you
the,
are.
I was going to say, it's one of the biggest challenges is getting the right information.
Yes.
Well,
Sorry,
and being
Kathy.
open to getting the right information, right? Like you are not just what people think a realtor does is go and got a tour guide. You're so much more than a tour guide because you have
Mhm.
all of these things that you have to be open to and to pull from, and the resources that you have to collect to be able to best serve people. And
Mm-hmm.
now you're also advising on whether it's a good idea to buy a second property. And maybe if we wait a little bit, like there's just so much that comes with being a realtor. And you are just this perfect package of that.
Thank you. Well, I enjoy what I do, and every day you get a new experience, and so you tuck it in your bag. I had a really cool client this summer, a single dad who was looking for a property for him and his son. It had to be convenient. His son liked to play outside and all of their parameters. And one day we pull up to this house that he's going to view, and there's a sailboat in the driveway. Now, I have never in my history of driving around Calgary seen a sailboat sitting in someone's driveway. But we get out and we start looking, and his girlfriend was there as well, and she says, do you know he is a sailor? So this single dad actually has a heartfelt passion for sailing. He owns a sailboat on Vancouver Island, and his dream of retirement is to be there and sail his life away. And funny things like this. And I could see the look in his eyes like, I'm not going to believe that it's a sign just because there's a sailboat in the driveway. But hello, yes, it was a sign. And he bought that house, got a great deal on it. And loves it more and more every day, as he gets to know. But how often do you see that? But these little things, you just keep your eyes open. You'll be surprised at what happens to bring someone to making their decision that's right for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I
When
feel like you have to be in the flow in order to help procure these
Mm,
miracle moments. So when your realtor is in the flow, my God, the experience of it all becomes so much more profound and so much more divinely led.
yeah, I hope so.
when we first bought our first home, I think it was in 2007, we came down. We were living up north of Manitoba, and our real estate agent started to take us in the area of Winnipeg that we wanted to go in. And my wife is so funny. I love her so much. But the first house that we go into, she's, yep, done. Yes. I'm like, no, you can't just fall in love with the first house. We have to keep looking. Well, wouldn't you know it, each house gets worse
I
and
love
worse.
that.
And the feelings of and
Mm,
we were getting further and further from that. Yes, this is,
mhm,
and I don't know if you've noticed this, but when you walk with people in their possible home, I think a good sign is, oh, that's where the Christmas tree goes. Oh,
mhm.
I can't wait for you to do. When they start telling the stories of
Yeah,
what's going to happen and they picture their lives there already, I would say that's a
yes.
pretty good sign of things to come and
Making themselves at home.
making themselves at home. And we put an offer on that house. We gave the guy asking, and here's the twist. He declined our offer and he actually countered us $5,000 more.
Cheeky bugger.
And we looked at him and we said, no, that's crazy. Why would we give you asking price and for you to come back and want 5,000 more? That doesn't even make sense. So my poor wife, heartbroken. I held her all night long as she
Mm.
cried. And I told her, I said, something's gonna happen. And when you know it, I wake up at 7:30 and there's a voicemail on my phone. And it's the real estate agent and she's freaking out. And it's early and he had a change of heart. He's gonna give you the house for asking price. And I'm waking her up. It's Saturday morning. I'm like, get up, we got the house. This is crazy.
Oh my goodness.
And but we were, man, what a that just makes my heart warm just thinking about how the stars align. But it was just so funny how I forced her to go through this gauntlet of homes she had no interest in pursuing.
It's well known, like realtors, when we get together, we talk about the inside scoop. Lots of times people will see a home like in the first few showings that fits. But because they've only started, they don't let themselves fall in love with the home. They feel like this is a really big deal. And so it should probably take them 30, 40, 50 showings until they find the right one. There's a feeling that if it's too easy, then it's not meant for them. And how many times you'll hear buyers months later saying, I still think about that first home we saw.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will say Scorpio always knows. I walk in and I trust my gut every single time. And my poor Virgo husband, but I have to see 100 houses so I can analyze and compare.
Yes. Well, I read a good story early in my career about how to show houses well, because I think our natural inclination and what we see on TV is that a realtor will take you through a house and they're going to tell you all about the house and tell you, I just hear this all the time. Look at this fabulous ensuite. You'll love to have a bath in here. You'll love this. Look at this great open floor plan. This is plenty of room. And I read this story about one of the best salesmen in his town, and it turned out that he was actually blind. And so when he would go into the houses, he could never tell people what was great about the house or what he thought about the house. He was always asking his clients, what are you seeing now? Does that work for you? How do you feel about this? Could you make the space work? And I always remembered that just seemed so smart to me and against our natural instincts. And so I very much, even if I like certain things about the house, I very much try not to put my own opinions on it, but to ask, like the blind man, what are you seeing here? And what do you like or dislike about the area?
That's so perfect because I remember her telling us, oh, you could do this. And if you don't like that, I'm like, okay, stop talking because I need space and quiet to be able to dream and feel the energy of the space. It's the same like with at the end of yoga class when they talk through that Shavasana pose where you're just in meditation, it drives me crazy. It's like you're ruining my moment.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And a lot of realtors are extroverted salespeople type A who, as myself too, like I'm a natural talker. So if it's quiet, I feel like I should talk. And it takes practice not to do that and to let the clients lead the way. Yes, give them the information that they need so they can make a decision, but to take the step behind them and let them lead their way through the house and through their buying process.
Smart.
I really want to know, Sue, because I feel like you're very creative too. One of my questions, and I don't think I've ever asked this question of anyone, is where do you get your inspiration from? Or where do you go to get inspired?
Well, first, when you asked that, I was just thinking something in the Professional Speakers Association that we all know, where your inspiration comes from is our message. What we have been through paves the way to what we speak to. And I noticed that in myself. I notice it in other authors and other speakers. And when it's really good, when someone has a really good presentation, and I usually feel charged from it, it's because it was a real mess that they went through. And now they've made a message into it, come out the other side and have some wisdom to offer for that. So I think that helps me, like having gone through messes, as we all have, and how I try to choose consciously how to use them. But where would I get my inspiration from if I'm going to create or work on my business? I meditate a lot. I am in quiet. I have a beautiful office that I really enjoy. I like a good cup of tea, and my children are all grown. And so I'm very sensitive because I was a young mom of four. There was no meditation going on there, really. So now I am very appreciative that my time is my own. And so I can really dive in. I'm always reading a book. I'm always listening to podcasts when I drive around, and I'm always taking in something that I hope will help me grow. And if you ever studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's this triangle. And when I was a divorced, bankrupt, single parent, we were on the main level of just having shelter and food and hoping that the money would stretch. And then there's self-esteem and contribution and giving back. At the top of the triangle, Maslow called it the self-actualization, where you express yourself. And this year, through my own prayers and meditations and reading, for myself, I'm not going to change his whole triangle, but for myself, I feel like I want to reach a divine actualization. I have my ideas in my head, but often things happen that you couldn't have imagined, or you meet people you weren't expecting to. That is what I'm always looking for, something unexpected. I know I didn't make it happen, but it's even for a higher and best use, greater good. That inspires me.
That's an amazing answer. And I feel like for me, 2025 is about this crazy higher perspective, so much so that I went for a healing session a few weeks ago, and she had taken me through this meditation where I disconnected from my root chakra and just experienced my higher self. Now, when you do that, there's no container. It's just the fullest possible expression of you. And that has been the most valuable tool I probably have ever had, because now for me to remember what it felt like to be in that energy, I get to bring that forward way more often and let it lead. So where 2024 felt like a struggle, 2025 has a totally different vibe about it. And I'm so excited it's only March.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That is so cool. it is all about these mind experiences that we have, right? I just read in one of the books I'm reading the example of, it must have been Deepak Chopra, because it was a medical thing where a fellow had his legs, he had fallen into liquid metal, and you can just imagine you're done after that. But in the hospital, how do they have a practitioner like this in the hospital? But they led him through a meditation, and the meditation was putting in the suggestion that he had fallen into a big pool of cool water. And so they changed that memory and helped him to switch that out. And his healing was dramatically different than what it should have been. And I'm thinking about it all week. Wow, what power from our beliefs have on our body and our whole. Of course, here's the constant. We want this, we want to do that, and we think about it, but it's those core beliefs and those values that anchor us where we're at.
Oh, 100%. And I think that for real estate, when not just for you, but as buyers and sellers, when we're in that space, it's very earthy. It's the earth practical stuff that we're dealing with. And how much different would the experience be if there was space for our higher selves to lead us through that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm just thinking, I don't find many people in the stress and the drama of home selling or buying who are relaxed and saying, I'm going to go with the flow. This is going to work out exactly as it needs to. The act of our wishes, we want the house to sell now, really just, it pumps up everything, the cortisol, the stress, the expectations. So yeah, it can be quite the opposite.
For sure. I wanted to know, Sue, how do you define success at this stage of your life?
How do I define success? Well, I used to define it as getting what I want, because that felt good. And
That's a great answer. We'll just stop right there.
So honest, yeah,
I just get what I want.
yeah,
because it feels good.
that, yeah, I would say that probably used to be my quick and final answer. And I used to be very intentional, manifesting, a driver personality. I will make my life happen. I've been through some hard stuff, and you pull up your bootstraps and you go through with your force. Now, with some age and experience and maybe a bit of hindsight, when I'm able to look back, success to me is my own ability to just grow and open up and be a blessing in other people's lives. You had a podcast, you were talking about your personalities. I find this super interesting, and I have always studied personalities. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, and how he has choleric, melancholy, sanguine, phlegmatic personalities at the core. And now we have all these modern versions of that. And we all have our personalities. And so I know what I am, and I go towards with my strengths. But as we get older, I think it's more about rounding out and not being so dogmatic in what I think is right and my strengths. I'm finding a lot more pleasure in trying to be conscious of how can I help other people, and how can I make others feel the best of themselves and encourage others, and to live life right now. I think that's a big thing. If I can help empower people to feel their strength to live life now. And I guess because I had an experience when my parents got divorced when I was 5. And so I never saw my dad's side of the family really while we were growing up. And I always had this one memory of baking bread with her in the kitchen, like around 4 years old. And it was just such a loving memory. And she had so much love to give. And so I always missed her my whole life. And then when I was in my early 20s and started having kids of my own, we got back in touch. And she wrote me this wonderful letter, and she was just such an encourager and a giver, and she just loved her family. And we were getting back in touch. This was our first year back together. And that summer, she went on a bus trip. Well, she actually missed the first bus and she wasn't late. So she missed the bus she was supposed to take to go visit her family. She had to go back home for a couple hours. And while she was there, she wrote me a letter. And in the letter, she said, I've been wanting to write you again, but I hadn't gotten around to it. So now that I missed my bus, I'm going to write you this letter. And then she goes to catch the next bus and she takes the bus up, meets her sister, and they travel along to see their family. And while they're traveling, they get hit by a car. They get in this car accident and she is killed. And so I get this news the next day or the day after that the grandmother that I had missed already my whole life has now permanently been taken away. I was devastated, just cut me right to my core. However, a couple days after that, I get her letter. It was really like a letter from heaven where she was telling me for some strange reason she missed the bus. It shouldn't have been that way. And I just felt like God was taking care of me because it was her time to go. And he put it on her heart to write a letter. And just her words of love and the timeliness of this totally healed I hardly grieved because it was just such a magic, mysterious happening of events. And that to me is what is important in life, having those magic moments, making sure people know you love them and making sure you give that. And I'll tell you I used to coach realtors and teach them how to run businesses. And I'll always remember this one agent, and he admitted he could not get over the grief of when he lost his mother. And it had been like 10 years. And he said, I still struggle with this. And I thought, I don't want my kids to ever struggle with it because I was given such a gift not to struggle with the grief of losing my grandmother. And so since then, too, it's always top of mind. What's really important in life? What is success? Knowing that if something happens to me tomorrow, my children, we have so much technology. I have videos all over YouTube. I have public ones. I also have some private ones. Should something happen, it's called an accident. You don't know when something's going to happen. And I have given them things over the years that always in the back of my mind, if I go and they're missing me, I want them to have these memories, this reminder. Here's a letter. I've written many letters to them. They have special songs that give them memories of them. We've done special things as family, just spending time so that even though the bond is strong, of course, they'll miss me when I'm gone, but I don't ever want them to be stuck in grief, but just free to live their fullest life. That it would be success to me.
Wow, I don't think I've ever heard anything better.
Yeah, I'm just mic drop. Let's just stop the recording right now. That was amazing, Sue.
Oh,
Man, honestly, we should just have a 3-hour podcast with you.
I can't talk for 3 hours.
That was beautiful. I love what I really felt through that whole thing was this incredible refinement to who you are right now and how grateful you are to the contributors. So the magical imprints left behind of the people that you have had experiences with, and how, because I would describe your energy as so soft and flowing. There's no rigidity. There is no friction. Everything just flows so beautiful. It's not an accident that there's these magical moments that happen throughout your life. It's not an accident. Yes, you're a Scorpio. We have a little bit more magic than others, but you're using it to give back. And that's the key. That's the refinement and the higher perspective of how do I serve the whole? How do I make it so that this beautiful gift of magic helps elevate everybody that I have experience with?
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Yes, that's totally my heart.
And I was going to say that as you were talking, so much of our youth is spent sharpening who we are until we get to the point where we're pretty refined and we just can't wait to share our gifts and bless those around us with who we've made ourselves to be. And I remember being younger, and I remember being younger long time ago, back when I was young. I just couldn't wait to get to where I am now because I wanted that wisdom that only came with time so that I could pass it on. I was desperate for that wisdom. And to be where I am now and still have, can't guarantee that I'll live for another 80 years, but if there's another 80 years ahead, I still have a really good road ahead of me to give a lot of these gifts and still refine myself. I'm not at the point where I'm done, but it'll be that these are interesting progressions. And I loved your answer. I thought that was beautiful.
Thank you.
I loved it too. So I think that we're now at the part where we're going to ask you the question that the last guest left for you.
What? I didn't know
Yes.
anything about this.
Surprise. So every episode at the end, we ask our current guest to leave a question, but that means that somebody's left one for you. And they've been very intuitive and thoughtfully left. So the question for you is, if you could give your 20-year-old self advice, what would it be?
Listen, I have asked myself that question and I never come up with anything good. So you should have told me before and I would have come up with a great answer. Okay, right off the cuff. If I could tell my 20-year-old self something, I think I would probably say, you're doing the right thing. Get married, have a family, and follow your heart, which I have done, and still, even to this day, even in business now, I second guess or I question or I overthink things. And yet I see over my life a constant, steady thread of what my heart has wanted to do and has done without me even trying it. And so I would tell myself that, give myself more of that permission, like, yes, do what you feel you're led to do and keep following your heart will lead you in the right direction.
That's really nice. And you're so lucky that you look back and you can say, my life has been heart led the entire way, because a lot of people don't listen to their hearts and then they take a different path and then they have
Yeah.
the what ifs and the regrets. And it doesn't sound like you have that at all.
Do you know what I have found happens is that if I'm trying to go by my heart and you go in this direction, if it's been not the right thing to do, something gets in the way. And I can think of examples right off the bat where I'm going in a direction I feel my heart is to go, and yet something turns the vehicle and I end up doing something different that I wasn't expecting to do. And then, like I have said before, when I look back in hindsight, I go, oh, I'm so glad that worked out the way it did. So I'm not afraid to go out and try things either, because I have this kind of belief, well, if I feel like I'm going this way, I'm going to go. And if it's not right, I know that the path will wind and I'll just follow that path. And is life that serious anyways? I remind myself, is it really that serious? It's just a big game we're playing here. Try and have fun with it. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? I end up living with my kids. That'd be the best thing.
Yeah, I would say my biggest regrets come from whenever I don't follow my heart, when I follow my brain, or when I try and follow money. That's where I end up getting into this dark alley, and it's, oh God, here we go. Here we go again. I ended up in the wrong place, and you're chasing that red herring when you should have listened to your gut. You should have listened to your heart. And man, that would be, if I could do a do-over, it would be more to follow my heart, because when I follow my heart, I find the woman of my dreams. I end up doing incredible things. I end up having beautiful children, meeting incredible people. This podcast is following our heart, and it has ignited us in ways that it's hard to even put into words. So you're watching amazing things happen right now because we're following our heart.
We're in the middle of the miracle. But you know what? I will say it sounds easy, and I can think of lots of ways, and I'm sure lots of listeners will think of ways where they did follow their hearts or didn't. But when you go forward, so right now I'm trying to make some decisions around some stuff, but it's harder going forward, or maybe it's not always this hard, but to feel, okay, what is the right choice? Well, there's reasons for this and there's reasons for that. And I'll tell you what I will do if I don't come to a conscious revelation about it. And everyone knows this about me. It's not a secret, but I will take a penny. So I have saved pennies. I know pennies aren't in circulation anymore, but I have a couple pennies in my office, and I'll take a penny and I'll flip it. And I will see what the decision is. Because it's just a game anyways.
That's a lot of trust in that
Oh,
penny.
right. And it's a lot of trust that you're going to be okay with whatever decision that penny makes.
Yeah. What happens is just like on that episode of Friends where Rachel was pregnant and she goes in the bathroom with Phoebe and Phoebe says, "Oh, no, you're not pregnant." And Rachel goes, "I'm not?" Oh, and then she realizes she was sad because she really did want to be pregnant. And Phoebe says, "No, I'm just kidding. You are pregnant." And Rachel, "That's a pretty dangerous game you're playing there." Yes, it is. But, it doesn't even really matter what the flip is. It reveals our hearts to ourselves. So if I go, what's heads and what's tails, and it lands, I don't know. It's like a supernatural thing. My spirit agrees with that. Or I might say, nope, that's not what I want to happen. So it's just the way of finding what your heart is trying to tell you.
That's super smart. Actually, if you just flip it and while it's in the air, you already call it and then you don't even look. That alone, if you're rooting for a certain side, that's your gut telling you that I
Yeah.
need to go that direction.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
Man, that's such a hot
Wow.
tip. I wish,
There's
yeah, my
there's been
13-year-old
so
self.
many, so many. So Sue, what would be your question that you want to leave for the next person?
My question would be, what was the worst job you ever had and why?
Oh,
Oh,
I love that question. I want to ask Sue a bonus question. Is that okay?
yes.
Sue, is that okay if we have a couple extra minutes with you?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, good. I want to know, and maybe you've already answered this question, but I love this one. It's what have you had to unlearn in order to grow into the person that you are today?
I had to unlearn being in control of everything and everybody. And listen, it wasn't my fault I became like this because I'm an oldest child. I am a Scorpio. I'm extroverted. I didn't have a dad growing up, so I was like the dad. My mom was very phlegmatic, which was fabulous for me, highly recommend. And so then I got married to obviously youngest child because oldest and youngest attract. And
Hmm.
he was very phlegmatic, like my mom. And I led the family. And then as a single parent, you are it. That was a bit overwhelming, I'll say, but out of the fear you get, or at least I did, got more controlling and was afraid. And so you're making sure everyone's going to be safe. So a lot of that, just the years of my life have created habits in me where I am in control of things and I make things happen how I want them. As when I got married the second time and the children grew up, and I'm not in a crisis mode anymore, I was still getting some feedback, sometimes from family, that I seemed controlling, even though I wasn't meaning it to be negative, but I hear that. And I have been in the process of unlearning how to manage everything and be in control. It's great to be an entrepreneur because I can still be like that with myself. But when it comes to other people, there's actually been a ton of freedom in not having to think for everybody else and tell everybody else what to do. And if you've never listened to John Gray, one of his recent podcasts, like his Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and his first wife of 30 some odd years passed. And then after many years, he got married again. So he's revitalized his talks. So my husband and I were listening to him on a road trip one time, and he was talking about how women, we don't need to nag our husbands and remind them to do stuff. And so he's pretty funny speaker as well. So we were laughing. And ever since that road trip, I said, oh, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. And it has transformed our relationship because I'm just not doing it anymore. And I'm free. It's freeing for me. And my husband has adjusted, and I can count on him for everything. And the unlearning has become actually more freeing. And I will continue to unlearn, but I also want to be helpful. What's that balance?
That's awesome. I think that that's an interesting art because there's lots of times where Katya will nag me when I need to be nagged. And
Lots of
well,
times. Shut up.
well,
I feel like that too. Sometimes people need that, right?
the reason that we have guests on this show is because I was sternly told to stop wasting my time with time wasters and go find amazing guests. And you know what? That's when the podcast really started to take off. I love our episodes where it's just the two of us, but man, the guests bring so much gold, and it's just this episode alone, Sue. You
Oh,
blew my mind so many times. So thank you so much.
well, I'm so pleased to have been invited to be a guest on your podcast. I've been looking forward to this. What a privilege, because when I run my own podcast, I'm always sharing. You're the host and you're sharing. So it's nice to be on the other side of the coin. I really appreciate
And
that.
you're still sharing.
I am still sharing. I guess I'm sharing, but you know what? It's without, I guess, without the pressure or without the expectations, because you wouldn't really give me any questions beforehand. And I wasn't really able to prepare. As a speaker, a writer, a business person, I'm usually very prepared. But so now we're just going with the flow.
To be fair, I
Right?
did
We did
email
not.
Sue. No, I did email her and I said, this is the little outline. I said, these are the 3 or 4 branches and we got this.
You know what? I find that we have a much more honest and open discussion when we all release the control over what, there it is. You're releasing the control over showing up and maybe not appeared.
Mhm.
However, you flowed through it so nicely. That's exactly what needed to happen.
I think you're in the
Well,
zone, Sue. I think you downloaded exactly the most beautiful stories that you could share with us. And seriously, I felt so blessed the whole time. This is totally an inspired episode. There's no script. And yeah,
mhm.
I'm just super grateful for that.
Well, you can cut me off if you want, but I have this other story in mind to share with you if you'd let me share one more thing.
Yeah, bonus
Um,
content.
yeah, but certainly edit it out if you run out of time. But it keeps coming into my mind, so maybe I'm going to share it. Maybe there's someone out there going through a really hard time right now. And when I moved to Calgary with the children, I got a job in sales. And then very soon after, I got headhunted into this prestigious real estate equity firm. And I was the assistant property manager for a while. And then I got promoted, air quotes, to be the executive assistant to the CEO of the company. Now, I had heard that he was not a nice guy and nobody really wanted to work for him, but um, it also came with a pay increase. So single mom needed the money. I'm like, I can put up with a schmuck for the money. However, within a year, I was like, oh my gosh, no, I cannot put up with the demeaning, belittling attitude. And so I did put in my notice and quit. And you know what? A few years later, someone put a hit out on him and he was shot 6 times sitting in his Rolls Royce in his Mount Royal driveway. So I wasn't the only one who found him unpleasant. Listen, he had a lot of enemies. He didn't die. He still got another
What?
chance. But when I quit, I thought Calgary would give me another job. I thought I was doing the right thing. I can't be in this abusive relationship. It's not right for me. And I thought I would just get something greater, better. But I didn't get work for 6 months. And it's really hard when you feel like you're doing the right thing and totally the wrong thing happens. And over those 6 months, I end up going into bankruptcy. I had to find out what the food bank was. I didn't know resources. It was just the hardest experience our family has ever gone through. But when I look back, the question is, was it bad? Yes, it was bad. But did it demolish me? Did we stay in the dirt where we got knocked down to? Or did it rebuild me into another kind of a person with a higher level of capacity, into someone who could become more resilient? And the funny thing is that this random job I got after 6 months, like I was just throwing my resumes for anything. I had no leads. I didn't know anybody. And I just feel if there's people out there who are struggling and everything is not going well, I have been there. And I got this interview, and this realtor offered me this job, and I could have cared less about what the job was. I just needed a certain amount of money to pay my bills, and I would have done whatever for that job. So I went and took that random job. But now when I look back, the funny thing is, you know what? I didn't know that random real estate job set me up. Like I learned everything about real estate. I became a vetted resource. I spoke at conference, almost all the major real estate conferences. I've been teaching real estate. I have this huge network that's really advantageous for my clients now. I did not know that this future would unfold from inside of me. I did not have that vision. And I think, thank God it did happen like that. And we're okay and we're more resilient. This is what happens. You're going through a hard time and you might not like where it's taking you right now. But I promise on the other side, you will discover, wow, I didn't know I had that inside of me. And there'll be time for a pause and thankfulness and gratefulness. I'm so thrilled where I'm at now with the experience I have now to help other people.
That's amazing. And what a Phoenix moment. I think that most people don't realize when they're in the shit, you know what? This is your Phoenix moment. You are burning off the old things that don't serve for you to transform into who you need to be for the next part of your life. So thank God for the Phoenix moment.
Yeah, they never feel good.
Oh,
But at least if you can tell yourself that there's a reason, it will not go to waste. You will come out the other side. You will be able to step into a next level, that self-actualization, keep reaching towards it. Really, it's the act of giving up, of not giving up. It's the act of not giving up that makes us a champion, is what I
right.
think.
And it's the ability to die to yourself, because you actually are giving in and surrendering to the
Yes.
moment so that you can move
Yes.
forward in light.
Exactly. Exactly. I hope someone gets that message today.
Man, for all the young people in their 20s or 30s that are in it, like in it so badly, just to know that it's for you. It's not happening to you, it's for you. You're being forged in the fire, and you come out the other side stronger with new tools and resources it's like this awakening of the new you. It's beautiful. It's a hero's journey, and life is probably more boring without that moment. It's your superhero moment.
Yeah, it is totally a hero's journey, and we're all on our hero's journey. We've got the pen in hand, we're writing our book. But it's hard to remember that when the times are hard and you feel like it's too much for you to handle and you can't pay your bills.
100%.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Sue. Where can everybody find you and hit you up? And you do have a book too, and
Oh
I,
my
I hope
goodness.
everybody comes and checks that out and checks out your podcast. So where can everybody find you?
So many fun things. SueStyles.com is my website. Please, if you're looking for real estate, let me help you. I have your best interest at heart. I also have a podcast called No Place Like Home, where I just give tips and talk a bit about real estate and really how to make your home. That's where my heart is. And what else was I supposed to leave you with?
Your book.
Well, my book, I wrote a book for entrepreneurs. I've actually written a few books, but I did write a book for entrepreneurs in particular because what I've always taught realtors and those in the industry is how to run a business. And so it's called The Little Red Stick. And it's a story about how Tabasco, the Tabasco brand, discovered how to make their products so good. And all of us can make our products great like Tabasco. And so all the details are in there. It's available on Amazon.
Awesome. I'm going to put all the links in. Man, one of my favorite episodes. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
We'll see you on the next episode, everybody.